All right, welcome back. I'm excited to introduce our next panel titled The State of AI in Retail. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage. And Xing-Chu, I'll hand it over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Xing-Chu Liu. I'm very glad to be here. I have a group panelist with me today, Ben, Daeil, and Jade. Love to have a good conversation with this crowd. Before we start, let me introduce myself briefly. I'm currently the SVP of Enterprise Data and Analytics at Macy's. Just joined the company recently and building a center of excellence of a group of data scientists, analysts, and data engineers. Our goal is to accelerate the analytics delivery and also scale the data-driven decisions, help Macy's and working with the broader team to accelerate the digital transformation. And today I have Ben, Jade, Daeil. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. So my name is Ben. I work at Wayfair, where I'm part of the search and recommendations group. That is the group that basically decides wherever we show a product on our site or in our email, in our marketing channels, what that product should be. I manage the machine learning group within that division. And prior to that, my journey in machine learning at Wayfair took me to various domains within retail. So I'm excited about getting to share some of my experiences here today. And I'll hand it over to Jade to introduce herself.
Thank you, Ben. Hi, everyone. My name is Jade. I'm the CEO and co-founder of StyleSage. We've been around for a little bit over 7.5 years. We like to say that we help retailers and brands look at the external world using data. So we provide data analytics, retailers and brands. In addition to that, we do product matching for them in finding the exact matches between products so they can adjust prices to be more competitive in the market. Behind all of that is a set of AI machine learning technology, from natural language processing to computer vision. And that's how some of our secret sauce and how we accomplish some of the things that we do. Daeil, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Jade. My name is Daeil. I'm one of the co-founder and CEO of AI.Reverie. And so we are a startup that focuses on the development of synthetic data, images that are used to train computer vision algorithms, but they're generated from software. And one of the areas that we've actually worked heavily in is in this sort of cashierless shopping to create training data for those kinds of systems. So we're super excited to be here and also talk about that as well.
Thank you, Daeil. And thank you all for the introduction. I think now we're ready to start with some questions here. All right, so I just got the first question in. So here the question is, how do you think about COVID and its impact on retail? Does AI factor in anywhere? So who likes to take this question? Okay, Jade, go for it.
Just some observing what's happening in the retail market and what's happening with our clients. I think what was really clear during COVID was that it really hurt retailers and brands that had a really strong physical footprint over their e-commerce business. So at least for our clients, we've seen that e-commerce and digital channel investments really been pushed to the forefront of where they want to put all the right skills and talent, the technology investment in. I think coming hopefully out of COVID soon, we're starting to see the successes of publicly traded e-commerce focused companies like Amazon, Zalando, ASOS, and that's given a lot of retailers and brands the confidence that there is a path forward, that COVID isn't destroying retail, that people still want to buy things that make them feel good, that fits their lifestyle needs. It's just a different way of reaching them. So that's kind of what we've seen across our clients and how their behavior has changed.
Thank you, Jade. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I can chat about what it's meant in our case in particular. The overall thought I would have here is that COVID has probably accelerated a lot of what we've seen before in more and more business moving online. and this is something that's been going on for years, right? If you think about different categories moving online, it started with books. Something like what we do, furniture, is relatively late in the journey because it's a bit more tricky to figure out how to ship a couch than how to sell a book. So this has seen quite an acceleration, and I assume a lot of that will stay. So a lot of what we've seen is people moving online now for they frankly didn't have another choice, but they actually enjoyed the experience and liked, and we were able to build trust that this is actually something you can do, and we expect that a lot of them will stay. To the second part of the question of how does AI factor into all of it, I think there's two aspects to it. AI is really fueled by data, right? Like a lot of these techniques will only work if you have large amounts of data, and more traffic means more data. So essentially you can do more with that, right? At the same time, there's a challenge because a lot of the traffic that we saw and a lot of the behavior that we saw was quite specific to the pandemic. So if you think, I give a concrete example, if you think about, the seasonality of products, for example, in the home space, we saw around this time last year, a lot of people shopping for things that they needed for their home office, which is probably pretty atypical for that time of the year. And that's something that is definitely important to keep in mind, that, as you're building systems to do these things in an automated way, that you have enough like checks and balances in place that you can also, take up and manually steer the ship where you need it, and that you're also aware of what footprint that leaves in your data for, what your models are going to decide next year, as they're still looking back historically to that time. Yeah, I'll pause there.
I would definitely echo your point, Ben, in terms of the COVID really accelerated the digital commitment through the retail industry. I think using Macy's as an example, where Macy's has hundreds of physical stores, and once COVID happened, Macy's was not part of the essential business, and all the stores have to be closed for a certain amount of time. That was huge pressure, and all traffic, sales, customers went online, and that really make it very apparent that going forward, that this change of behaviors will not go back, to the fully, pre-COVID. And how can the Macy's or just overall retail industry adapt themselves to really fully invest into the AI, into the data and analytics? That's really actually the whole reason behind creating this COE group within Macy's, to accelerate and elevate the analytics talents across organization and fully invest into the data and AI to drive the future retail.
Yeah, and I can add something. One of the things that's interesting, we're seeing a lot from our side, is the need for a contactless shopping. And one of the things we're working on actually brings up the point about how when it comes to worker safety, people are, due to COVID, people are interested in creating systems that allow people to buy things like the Amazon Go and those kinds of, cashierless shopping experiences. So that we've definitely seen an uptick of that and interest in those kinds of technologies as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead, Jay.
If I may piggyback on some of the points here, one of the interesting things our clients are using data to understand is during COVID, how has people's shopping behavior changed, and what are the different things people are looking for? And more importantly, going into spring, as the vaccines are starting to get rolled out globally, we imagine that life might be going back to normal, hopefully by the end of this year, maybe by the summer on some regions of the world. What are people looking to buy? So in some of the data that we collect for our clients and Surface is sifting through Google Trends, and in a very specific retail apparel footwear categoric lens. So for within jeans, what are people actually going to buy jeans, or are they still buying sweatpants? Are people going to look, when they say face mask, is it skincare, or is it something that's going to prevent you from being infected? And these are all really important trends that come up that helps inform retailers in terms of, merchants, what to include their assortment on your digital shelf within the first and 2 pages search results. What are some things you can actually A/B test? You need some of those clues in order to know what to A/B test, but because you can't just randomly pick 2 things like, let's, check this against that. But so what's really important in terms of data is having that, when you have this massive amount, having the right machine learning to surface up the right insights in order to figure out, well, what are the things that we're going to test and invest in our inventory? So those are some of the key questions for retailers. And then for the global ones in particular, let's say you have a strong market in Italy versus the UK versus the US, all in varying stages of lockdown and what's happening with COVID. It's really important for them to understand, well, for each market, are these data points sharing something slightly different so that we can have more localized strategy for those particular countries. And I think our clients, I'm proud to say that they've invested in the right talents pre-COVID so that they have the right teams that can actually take advantage of the insights that are surfaced to them. So it's not just AI sharing things that you can use, but you have to have the right teams and processes in place in order to actually take action on it. And that seems to actually be one of the challenges we see in some of the newer clients who haven't had those processes set up and look to us to give some guidance on, well, what are some of the best practices from other folks who've been doing it a little bit longer.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, let's see what's the next question we have. All right, so which challenges have you faced as you apply AI within retail? And please provide examples. I'm sure you all have a lot of examples, so who wants to start first?
Yeah, I was actually thinking, oh boy, where do I start? Yeah, I have some thoughts, and I can definitely talk through a more concrete example to make it tangible. I think the overarching theme is, and Jade, you already mentioned some of that we're actually, when we're talking about AI here, modeling and sort of the machine learning and all of that is only ever part of a puzzle. And really, we need to be talking about processes and whether that be like business processes or like larger engineered systems that have, that component in them, but that need a lot more around them to actually pull off leveraging AI for retail. So the challenge in that I've typically faced is more like, how do you assemble that puzzle? How do you make all the pieces fit together? And that's both on the technical side and on an organizational side. And I can walk through a pretty concrete example from the domain that I'm working in right now, which is recommendations. So we have a system for recommending what we call what you could conceive of as like sets of products. So what I would like to do is knowing what Daeil tends to be interested in and what he's browsing and so on, be able to recommend him a set of products that he might be interested in. And we used to have a legacy system for that, which is like relatively rule-based and heuristics-based, but not bad. Like it's just basically looking at data, looking at what I'm going to stick with Daeil as my example, what he browsed, what particular types of products he looked at, and then based on that, come up with some idea of here is a set of products that is very close to what he seems to be interested, given what he's done in the last 30 days or something like that. And now we had this great idea, and this is often where it starts, and where the hype starts of like, oh, could we put more machine learning into this? Could we make this smarter, right? And could we do things that are that take into account more factors like his stylistic preference, what he likes, what he can afford, like what price he's able to pay. And then as we started working on it, we find that, well, the challenge is a bit that, yes, those are all great ideas, but the data that we have right now, because we have an existing system that's generating that data, doesn't actually allow us to make inference about all of these things so easily. So what we realized is like, yeah, even if we could build a great model to do something like this. Like, you know, it would be very hard to do, but even if we could do that, then we wouldn't actually have like the right sets of products to recommend either. So what we found is actually you need to change a whole lot of things all at once. Like, you need to come up with a model, but you actually need to also, like, if you think of this as, you know, like your own little digital supply chain, you need to actually have the right sets of products that you can recommend. And then, you know, you need to have the right tagging of them and the right representations that you can feed them into a model. And it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Like, you know, you kind of, you need the data to be able to do it, but you know, to generate the data, you kind of need to have the system also. So, and this is where the technical challenge becomes organizational, you know, where you need to figure out, like, what are all the things that you need to change more or less at once, or at least in some kind of coordinated plan to make this work and pull this off. And this is kind of typically what I've seen, and I think was probably going to be a theme around this panel of, like, you know, pulling off this technology and making it work in the space is much more than, you know, just the modeling, but there's a lot of organizational complexity to it too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Jade.
I think Ben is 100% right. At some point, the challenge becomes an organizational one. So we're going into our 8th year now. When we started 7.5 years ago, the industry was starting to talk about data. But fundamentally, so way back in the days before I got involved in tech, I actually studied fashion design at Parsons. And when it comes to apparel and design, it's about the feeling of the fabric, how it fits you, how it makes a person feel, how it enhances all the features that you love, how it makes you feel confident, or however you want to feel, and how you market and package yourself. So it's a very intimate craft in creating this particular piece of clothing that you wish that the customer is going to love. Now, that is very counterintuitive to something very structured and logical, like data and analytics and what it's telling you. So when we first entered the market, while there was a ton of interest, like while we were seeing a lot of importance in data in making these large scale decisions, the reality was some of the organizations didn't have the right skill sets in place to really ingest the data, because it's counterintuitive to how you would build a technical flat or have your tech packs or your specs for your clothing. That's all very different from looking at data and telling them how to design. So there was an inherent conflict in that, and a lack of trust in what data can tell you that the designer wouldn't know. And I think those are really fair points. And over time, I think the industry started to get comfortable on how the two can actually have a really happy marriage and meeting in the middle, where you can design beautiful things that people desire and want and feel confident wearing, but at the same time that scale, so it fits more needs of more people that you're trying to design for. And we're finally reaching a point where I think both the customers themselves, as well as the retailers and brand themselves, are starting to get comfortable with what that looks like. And it was a pretty long journey for sure. We see that in our own clients and organizations, as well as the newer ones who are coming to us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the data has always been a challenge, right? And also combining that expectation with the business decisions and be realistic about it, but also be embracing that reality. I think that's that's part of a challenge. I also see the challenge on the delivery side. Once you have the AI solutions, and how do you really make that into, you know, business stakeholders' hands so they can make smarter decisions and take actions upon it, and not for once, for repeated occurrence going forward. Then you got to invest into your operating rhythm, and or eventually make it more automated solution. But even going through that, you need to go through change management as well. So there's a lot of art and science balancing between the two. And Daeil, I think you have something to say as well, right?
Okay, I'll just add, I mean, I think I'm coming from a different direction here. I can speak much more to potentially, you know, what I work on is computer vision and sort of being able to install cameras in a retail experience. And I think that can be quite transformative. So you can imagine, you know, just the idea of a cashier list, you know, just go in, grab the clothes, come back out, and everything's registered is really powerful. But also, speaking to the points that some of the other panelists are talking about, it can actually enable new data lakes as well. So now you have a way of understanding traffic flow precisely. You have a way of creating an experience that actually can transform the retail experience instead of sort of coming in, you enter, and now you have a Google Maps of being able to get what you want and being able to understand the patterns of the way people shop and how they like to look at things and browse at things. And that can all be enabled in the next few years. And so I think there's going to be a lot of interesting ways where new forms of data are now going to be accessible once you have these kinds of very advanced computer vision technologies that are capable of being able to extract a lot of information from the scene itself. So I'm excited about that. And there's a lot of hard challenges from the AI side of things I'm happy to get into, but that's a very interesting and future technology that I think will be really transformative.
I love the area you're working. I think it's so interesting. And the way that we think about AI is really just at the point of when the human-centered task becomes super boring and tedious to humans is when the machines can take over, so the humans can focus on things that has much more premium added value. So one of our clients actually did something kind of like what you're doing now, but in a human way. They had all of their local stores. There's like I don't know the best way to call them, handler for each of the stores, where they call back into the headquarters every single week and report back not just what's selling, right? Because that's really easy. You can see it through your ERP or a sales system to see what's selling. But what was interesting is they were telling headquarters, the design and merchant teams, what were people touching? What were people picking up and putting back onto the shelf? And the woman who like has 40 things and walked into the dressing room but came out with 3 and then buying only 2, what were those things? And I think those are really incredible insights on what was, because it could tell you, well, they all tried on all these pants, but nobody bought them. Could be a fit problem, right? Or it could be, you know, the color is very different in person than it was when you got the factory sample. These are all things that you wouldn't know it's a problem until you see the human behavior patterns. So I love that what you guys are working on to automate that, because I remember when we spoke with this client, we don't touch that process, but you know, they were sharing that experience and they were just like, oh, it is so hard to sift through all these qualitative notes and then figuring out what was actually happening before, but they knew that it was important. So I love the area they're working on. I think it's so important just to get the on the ground insights.
Yeah, I think it's also going to even just the way, like, I like that example you were talking about, how somebody was taking 40 clothes. I mean, that can actually, if you could have information around that, you could actually redesign the architecture of a retail experience so that you start understanding how people like to sort of look at things and create a flow that's much more intuitive. So I think it's just these analytics and information right now, they're trapped, you know, because we don't have the technologies yet to be able to fully extract them. But in the near future, I think we will be. And just to add a little thing about synthetic data, what's really nice is that you can maintain privacy, right? One of the challenges of creating a system like that is not being able to use real world data and people data. But if you can actually do that all synthetically and then be able to train algorithms that way without having to focus on those difficult issues of bias and ethical ones as well. So I think there's something nice there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we're talking about, you know, some opportunities and some challenges, I just want to recognize retail is actually an amazing business where from the traditional type of, you know, AIs or optimization solutions, inventory management, supply chain, merchandising, to, you know, computer vision, image processing, voice recognition, smart device, IoT, whatever you name it, there is a place you can apply it and have a huge impact. So I think that's also the beauty of the retail. So having said that, let's take the next question. Please provide examples. So the greatest opportunities, this is the hard one. I'm curious about your opinions. Daeil, you want to go first?
I was going to speak again to that about unlocking the actual. I personally am really excited about this idea of computer vision helping drive retail experience because it's such a powerful mode of being able to understand the whole experience through vision, you know. But there's also another thing I want to bring up in terms of also safety as well, right? So these cameras can allow for things around safety and also there's a lot of things happening in the world right now, but also can create a safer retail experience, as well as also dealing with theft and being able to understand how things are being stolen. All of these things are just layering on to some of this of the kinds of technologies that excites me in that space. So I'll end there and I'll let others speak to it.
How about you, Ben? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my area of expertise is obviously more online, right, and in e-commerce. And I had a hard time thinking about, like, you know, what is the greatest opportunity is very hard, because I think to your point earlier, one of the things that's pretty interesting about the space is that there's essentially no area where you, in theory, couldn't use it. You know, there's tremendous opportunity essentially to deploy these types of technologies across anything that you're doing, especially if you're thinking of yourself as an e-commerce platform that really tries to solve all of these traditional retail problems through technology. And the way I would probably categorize the opportunities is more in you know, the must-dos and the can-dos. And the way I think about this is, you know, what does AI really give us is essentially automated decision making, right? So you replace what you would manually do with a model, or, you know, some logic that will basically say, you know, given these circumstances, this is what we should be doing. And then there's certain areas where it's very evident that you need that, which is something like recommendations or marketing, and it's purely based on the volume of decisions that you need to make. So if, you know, you have millions of visitors every day, then you're kind of trying to emulate, you know, what the salesperson in a store would do. You can't do that manually. Like you need computer logic to do it, right? So those are the earliest ones, and those are the ones where also we've, you know, seen adoption in as the earliest. Those are probably what I would call like the must-dos if you want to be successful in the space. And then there's the can-dos, which are more things where you can still do them manually. Those are more like operational things, like, you know, if you think about your physical supply chain, but also like, you know, your digital catalog and how you manage it, things like, you know, what Jade was mentioning, and matching your catalog to competitor catalogs and so on. There are still a lot of opportunities where you can do these things in fairly manual workflows, but there's obviously also an opportunity to automate those things, or, you know, manage bigger catalogs at larger scale through automation, where that type of logic will always be, you know, or will need to be embedded in some sort of workflow or process or so that powers it. And then, you know, it really just depends on the availability of data, the availability of skill, the scale of the problem, and is it going to be worth it for you and your particular business?
I think from our experience, so we very much have the fortune of working with strategy teams within these retailers and brands, which is a little bit of a newer class of professionals that started cropping up in the last, probably, I would say 7 to 8 years. We're talking about like the ex-McKinsey's, ex-BCG's folks who are now working within retailers to help figure out how to prioritize and really grow the business. On the other side, BCG is actually one of our major clients. So through them, we actually glean a lot of insights on what are some of the global CEOs thinking about, what's keeping them up at night. And I think the reality is, when it comes to AI and how to apply within the business, it's very case by case different, because every organization is a different stage of adopting or not adopting such technologies. And what we often talk about is there's 2 ways to start thinking about it. One is cost cutting, right? That's about your bottom line. The other one is growing your top line and revenue generating. And then both have an impact in how, you could profit from the business, and both could be really important. And so it's really about that prioritization, because you can't do everything at once. You do everything at once and you do everything terribly. So you really have to focus and help your team prioritize. The best leadership are the ones that tell your team, these are the 2 things I need you to focus on. Go, run and execute this quarter on. So some of the examples in cost cutting, for example, which we've talked a lot about through this panel, is making internal operating processes and procedures more efficient. So that does mean automation, like Ben said, automating, getting data, automating some of the decisions. And then the other things is really smartly using that to figure out demand forecasting and your allocation. And allocation doesn't just apply to physical stores. It also applies to e-commerce, because let's say you're in Amazon, your distribution is global. So your allocation within even your warehouse locations has an impact on not only your carbon footprint, which is a whole other big issue, but also in how efficiently and how fast you can get stuff to your customers. That has to do with distance. You can't like artificially shrink distance. If your warehouse is 100 miles away, it's 100 miles away. And then other things like for us very specifically is just giving strategy teams the right data so they can figure out if we're going to launch a market in Indonesia, if we're going to enter the market in Vietnam, if we're going into France, what do those competitive landscapes look like, and how can we make better decisions and figure out the right assortment and pricing. So to give you an actual example, we did a pricing study on outerwear a couple of years ago. And what's really interesting is outerwear that has furry hoodies. So whether it's fake fur or real fur, whatever, up for debate, in Russia, you can upcharge it by 50%. It is like insane. And it's very, very particular to the Russian market, something about the customer preference and their willingness to pay. Whereas that same kind of furry hoodie doesn't command the same price premium in France, for example. So using the kind of these data, but also kind of really understanding the attribution of those products. So that will go into kind of the computer vision area where Daeil's company is sitting in. It's understanding like, how do customers see these products and search for them, and the willingness to pay based on the attributes that they're searching for. So this is kind of on that cost cutting part. And on the revenue generating part, there's so many like amazing, interesting things like B2C applications, like visual curation. People looked at this, also love to buy this. This goes with that. I mean, it's a very like simple way, but at scale, it's incredibly daunting for a human to do. And there's a lot of companies doing that. So that one isn't new or cutting edge. But if you haven't been doing that, and e-commerce is a big part of your business, you're probably really behind in the game. So it's really about understanding that. And then other parts is personalization, conversational support. All of those things are possible to automate, to provide a human-like experience to customers without having armies and armies and humans, where actually quality control is incredibly difficult to do when there's conversational support with humans. So a lot of these but it's a matter of coming from leadership. Where should we focus on? Do we see that the customer support is really why our business is lagging, so we need to support that? Or is it because we don't have the same exciting discovery that some of our competitors are doing, so we need to focus on those front-end technology? Or are we fundamentally just really heavyweight organizations with too many bureaucracies that's preventing us from moving fast? And that takes a really hard look from a leadership level and organizationally how you need to move. So that's my 5 cents.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely echo what you said. I also like to take a step back before just calling out the specific AI technologies. I do see as a retailer, one of the greatest opportunities is really invest into the customers. At Macy's, we call it a customer lifetime relationship. It's really leveraging the data, AI, and intelligence to know who the customers are. To me, this is really much shift from the past of the traditional retailers where looking at the stores, making sure I have the products available for the customers coming in. Now, it's the shifting is we need to proactively reaching out, understanding who customers are, what they really need, and what the values we can bring to our customers. And for fashion industry, as you mentioned, it's a lot of art and science balanced industry. And how do we understand what customers' styles they like, and what shirts would match with what pants, and how do you put that together? I see a lot of AI technology can also come in to make it so convenient as customers shopping more online. instead of trying those, the clothing within the store, now you can virtually try it and see how it looks, right? Those type of technology can also benefit the customers and driving the value for the long way. So, all right. So thank you all for sharing, and we're ready for next question. Where do you see AI in retail heading over the next 5 years? This is forward-looking. Love to hear your vision. Who's ready? Okay, Jade, go for it.
I think I can only speak very more specifically to the lane that we swim in, since we're in data analytics. I think there's going to be a big shift from computational to actually identifying opportunities and actually interpreting insights. So for example, now we can surface within Google search, particularly within the denim category, that baggy jeans and wide leg jeans has an increase, like this really sharp increase in velocity of search. So while the absolute volume still remains relatively minor compared to some of the other common styles, there's a huge velocity and surge that's pretty consistent in the last 6 months. Now that tells you something, but it requires a human, a merchandiser who has years of veteran experience of understanding denim and her customer to say, well, using this, we're actually make a call and we're going to get these and these and these styles into our assortment. I think at some point, it's that computational power is going to shift into actually making some of those decisions for the humans. But again, there's a trust factor in this. So it has to be a proven case where when the machines interpret those insights and identify opportunity, how often is it actually right? And that requires a lot of testing. So I think we're really long ways away from actually getting into that process. And then the other part is I'm kind of thinking back to my fashion design days where I spent like hours and hours like laying down flats and draping and making this pattern and then create that I think there's a lot of probably opportunities there for AI to actually get involved in the design process and take off some of those like for the very technical flat making, for example, there's a lot of things that you could probably automate in that to create the right tech packs so that you can generate products faster, because today's customer is just impatient. They want what they want yesterday, if not today. So I think those are kind of two main areas I see it shifting into from my perspective.
Thank you, Jade.
So I actually think of the future of retail, actually, I know we talked a lot about, I talked a lot about sort of cashless shopping, but I actually think the future of retail in my mind is in retail at home through things like augmented reality. So imagine you want to buy something from Amazon or, Wayfair, and you want to just be able to place that in the living room of your home, right? And then it's immediately scaled, it understands your context, surroundings. You can put drapes on your windows if you wanted to. And then you have a digital avatar for yourself where you can actually put on clothes, right? I just see the future where people are, I'm not sure if it's the best future, but it's a future where everyone can just sit on their couch and order everything they need just by sitting and seeing how things look in their homes or walk around and doing that space. Given, these technologies are advancing, but once it comes and AR becomes a common form of how we interact with the world, I see retail fundamentally shifting a lot towards that direction. So I'm sort of excited to see that particular future happen in the next 5 years.
Cool, yeah. Actually, we have some investment in that, so you can actually try out some of that technology, I think using our app, where you can already see how well it's working, or maybe not working in some cases, but I think those are good points. I'll add to the on the side of e-commerce and online and what I expect to happen there is that to Daeil's point and to Jade's point, like a lot of these things that you guys have been talking about, those are also things that we've been developing in-house for our own catalog management, for things like competitor matching, understanding how we stand relative to the market, or computer vision for some of those AR applications, but also for you to be able to take a photo and us to be able to show you, yeah, we have something like that in our catalog. I imagine that a lot of these technologies will become democratized over the next 5 years and will become more and more available in like, multiple steps, where one for teams or technology, teams who would work within maybe more traditional companies, maybe new companies. A lot of the difficulty of building these sorts of things and of figuring out like, how to go from model to something that actually runs in production and so on, that becomes easier and easier as there's more and more of an ecosystem around how to do that. And that goes all the way to the full capability itself becoming available as a service. That goes into things like, recommendations or a search engine that you can literally just buy as a service from a third party who understands how to build these things. Again, going back to AI and retail is potentially everywhere. Like the first of it that we're seeing right now is with these very data intensive applications where it's where there's been an investment over 10, 20 years already in those areas. But I assume this will follow also with other more operational things like forecasting and so on, supply chain solutions for optimization over time. Whether it's going to be in the next 5 years or it's going to take a bit longer remains to be seen, I think. And then lastly, I think what this means is that, companies can still differentiate themselves by figuring out which of these technologies are things that we are actually fine just to buy, because they are not key to us as a business and what we do as a business, because ultimately what we mostly care as retailers is the customer, right? But there are going to be pieces where, and I can talk a bit about how we think about that, where we say like, we actually consider that a competitive advantage, that we're going to be able to do this better than the generic solution that will be available through, the Amazon cloud or the Google cloud, because we understand our domain better, we understand our own data better. So we will continue investing in that. And where it's also becoming a question of like, should we actually feed our data to someone who offers this type of solution generically, because to the point of the data being a lot of value in your decision making, you don't want to give up that competitive advantage that you have by amassing a large data set, and you don't want to necessarily share that with others, of course. So those are like my high level thoughts on the direction that things are probably going to move for e-commerce particularly.
Yeah, what you said then really resonated with me is about the democratizing, the technology and the AI solutions, over the coming years. That will be the trend, as the computing power, and technologies are just getting more and more easily available, and more, AI talents, getting into the field and really driving that. But also I see your point of giving that foundational technology becoming more easily available. Now the business have a better chance to really ingest their business specific knowledge and strategies into it more and driving better decisions. To your point of, that could be a combination of the fundamental core plus a lot of invest into unique business, nature of that. The other part, Daeil, in terms of like people working or like shopping more from home, I definitely see that as a trend. I still see potentially going forward, there's another path of having more like seamless omni-channel experience. Doesn't matter where I go to the store, shop online, I have that seamless experience. And that still could exist, but with the technology, you gotta know your customer much better. You understand which part of the customer journey they're on, and then feeding them with the right offering all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with you there.
All right. Let's see. What's the next question? Final thoughts. Wow, time really flies. So now, what are the final thoughts on AI in retail? Daeil, you want to start?
So final thoughts on AI in retail. I mean, I think the ultimate goal is, in my mind, is to make the retail experience less hassle, more enjoyable. You get what you want exactly when you want it. And all of these technologies are sort of converging, I think, to that ideal point. So computer vision is one aspect of it. I mean, we talked about things like when it comes to even, just personal recommendation systems, a lot of things go into it. And so this is all converging, I think, to an experience that makes it really, really easy to be able to get what you need at the right time and in an expedited way. I'm excited about the computer vision aspects of it, given that that's what our startup focuses on. And I'm particularly excited about what it will unlock in terms of new ways of understanding that experience. So, the more we can sort of add to that, to be able to provide more data to especially large companies that are trying to understand their customers better, and to be able to sort of, democratize that or create a way that a lot of people can access it, is going to just improve the retail experience in general. So I think as a final thought, I'm excited about that future and making sure that we also maintain sort of the right privacy and things like that in order to, while we're building those kinds of models. So.
Jade, what do you think?
I think from my perspective is I am looking forward to when we figure out the right balance between AI and physical retail, because I've been an e-commerce shopper for a really long time. I can't tell you the last time I stepped into a store, but when I do step into a store, the few rare times in the last few years, I found myself really missing that experience of picking things up, touching them, because there's all these amazing things you can do about surfacing things that are personalized to you, that are priced correctly, and all those things that maybe could fit you really correctly. But something about the delight of touching that physical product is a very innate human desire, and I think that that's something that e-commerce and some of the more AI focused retail channels that would have some difficult time in replicating that. So I'm really looking forward to when it's the right balance to provide the best experience, like Daeil said, the right experience when you want it, how you want it, but also not forgetting that there's a surprise and delight factor of shopping that makes it so fun. And I'm looking forward to kind of going back to the days where things are in that stage and correctly balanced. So I don't know what that looks like yet, and I think we're on a discovery journey as an industry. But I think we'll get there soon, hopefully, especially after COVID.
Jay, your comment made me remind me of all those trips I would make sometimes in foreign cities I've never been to, and you just randomly walk into and see something amazing you want to buy. And that is definitely priceless in and of itself. And, and those things are definitely need to be preserved. I agree with you.
Yeah, I second that. I'm an avid runner, and I prefer to still buy my shoes in a store than online, because you get like the best recommender system that we can build these days is like nothing compared with an actual sales agent who knows something about their domain, and that also leads me to think like there's still endless opportunity out there to work against these things. And maybe I'll add as a final thought, like from someone who is, very much a technology enthusiast, and didn't really think that, I didn't really think at the beginning of my journey that I would enjoy working in retail all that much. But it is truly amazing in the sense that because these kinds of technologies touch everything that you do in theory, and it's super fast paced at the same time, so you get very quick feedback on everything that you do, that especially if you're interested in the technology behind it and technology for technology's sake, this is actually a really, really interesting and great domain to be investing your time in.
Yeah, I agree with your points about, number one, this is a fun job. I mean, applying the AI in the retail, there's so much fun. You're so close to the customers, and to Ben's point, you're so quickly getting the customers' reactions or response. If you do something great, you're gonna be rewarded very quickly. If you do something bad, well, you know what's gonna happen. So that's part I really enjoyed about the fast pace, but also you see the impact, you see the direct impact through your work. And that's really rewarding to me personally as well. Well, with that, I think I want to say thank you all to all the panelists we have today, Ben, Jade, and Daeil. Thank you all very much for taking the time and sharing your great thoughts. And I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope everybody, watching the discussion, learn something. And if you like to follow up, feel free to follow up with us offline as well. And you all have a great day. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, and a special thank you to our moderator as well for keeping us moving. That was a great discussion, and I know the audience is going wild virtually, of course. All right, for the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. And along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and check out our amazing AI exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.